This is going to be the worst audiobook recording in the entire world. It is June 6, 2025. I thought it would be funny to record Who Goes There, because I'm pet sitting, and one of the dogs here is a husky, so he likes to howl at random. So I thought it would be really funny if I just tried to record this and see if the dogs want to randomly cooperate and magically start howling and barking at the parts where there are dogs doing that in the story. It probably won't happen, and you will hear the birds talking. It's getting about the time where George will start wolf whistling soon. Let's get on with the story and see how far we can get. This is 22,000 words long. I have no idea how long of a recording that will turn into. Let's get to it. Who Goes There by John Wood Campbell Jr., published under the name Don A. Stewart. Originally published in the 1938 issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine, also known as Astounding Stories of Super Science and Analog Science Fiction and Fact. Transcribed from a PDF scan starting on December 28, 2024 at 6:21 p.m. Transcription note: all capitalized letters at the start of some paragraphs have been removed. One typo of host to horse and several instances of Antarctica not being capitalized have been fixed. The document and the story contains are both in the public domain. This was transcribed from the original PDF to allow more people to read it easily, with text-to-speech programs and more. You are encouraged to download this and share with anyone. You are encouraged to download and share this with anyone and everyone you want. Transcription by Tin Yell, pronounced exactly how it sounds, who is an autistic, non-binary, aroace lesbian who uses it itself and skull self pronouns. Happy New Year from January 1st, 2025. Who? Is that your closest friend or a monstrous imitation, breed of an alien, deadly world? Who goes there? The place stank. A queer, mingled stench that only the ice-buried camps know, compounded of reeking human sweat and the heavy, fish-oil stench of melted seal blubber. An overtone of liniment combated the musty smell of sweat and snow-drenched furs. The acrid odor of burnt cooking fat and the animal, not unpleasant smell of dogs, diluted by time, hung in the air. Deja vu. I feel like I already recorded this, but I don't think I did. Let's continue. Lingering odors of machine oil contrasted sharply with the taint of harness, dressing, and leather. Yet somehow, through all that reek of human beings and their associates, dogs, machines, and cooking, came another taint. It was a queer, neck-ruffling thing, a faintest suggestion of an odor alien among the smells of industry and life. And it was a life smell. But it came from the thing that lay bound with cord and tarpaulin on the table, dripping slowly, methodically onto the heavy planks, dank and gaunt under the unshielded glare of the electric light. Blair, the little bald-pated biologist of the expedition, twitched nervously at the wrappings, exposing clear, dark ice beneath, and then pulling the tarpaulin back into place restlessly. His little bird-like motions of suppressed eagerness danced his shadow across the fringe of dingy gray underwear hanging from the low ceiling, the equatorial fringe of stiff graying hair around his naked skull, a comical halo about the shadow's head. Oh, there goes the birds. Commander Gary brushed aside the lax legs of a suit of underwear and stepped toward the table. Slowly his eyes traced around the rings of men sardined into the administration building. His tall, stiff body straightened finally, and he nodded. 37. All here. His voice... His voice was low, yet carried the clear authority of the commander by nature, as well as by title. You know the outline of this... You want to join in? Not yet, man. That's the husky. Just wait, man, I'll tell you when. He's not gonna listen. He doesn't know. He's just doing that because the birds are doing it. You know the outline of the story back of that find of the secondary pole expedition. I have been conferring with second-in-command McCready and Norris, as well as Blair and Dr. Copper. There is a difference of opinion, and because it involves the... Lightning, what are you doing? And because it involves the entire group, it is only just that the entire expedition personnel act on it. I hope you can hear him. I am going to ask McCready to give you the details of the story, because each of you has been too busy with his own work to follow closely the endeavors of the others. McCready? Moving from the smoke-blued background, McCready was a figure from some forgotten myth, a looming, bronze statue that held life and walked. 6 feet 4 inches he stood as he halted beside the table, and with a characteristic glance upward to assure himself of room under the low ceiling beams, straightened. His rough, clashingly orange windproof jacket he still had on, yet on his huge frame it did not seem misplaced. Even here, 4 feet beneath the drift wind that droned across the Antarctic waste above the ceiling, the cold of the frozen continent leaked in and gave meaning to the harshness of the man. And he was bronze, his great red bronze beard, the heavy hair that matched it, the gnarled, corded hands gripping and relaxing on the table planks, they were bronze. Even the deep sunken eyes beneath heavy brows were bronzed. Age-resisting endurance of the metal spoke in the cragged, heavy outlines of his face and the mellow tones of the heavy voice. Norris and Blair agree on one thing. That animal we found was not terrestrial in origin. Norris fears there may be danger in that. Blair says there is none. But I'll go back to how and why we found it. To all that was known before we came here, it appeared that this point was exactly over the south magnetic pole of Earth. The compass does point straight down here, as you all know. The more delicate instruments of the physicists, instruments specifically designed for this expedition and its study of the magnetic pole, detected a secondary effect, a secondary, less powerful magnetic influence about 80 miles southwest of here. The secondary magnetic expedition went out to investigate it. There is no need for details. We found it, but it was not the huge meteorite or magnetic mountain Norris had expected to find. Iron ore is magnetic, of course, iron more so, and certain special steels even more magnetic. From the surface indications, the secondary pole we found was small, so small that the magnetic effect it had was preposterous. No magnetic material conceivable could have that effect. You might hear the conures hissing over there. That's what I call it. No magnetic material conceivable could have that effect. Soundings through the ice indicated it was within 100 feet of the glacier's surface. I think you should know the structure of the place. There is a broad plateau, a level sweep that runs more than 150 miles due south from the secondary station, Van Wall says. He didn't have time or fuel to fly farther, but it was running smoothly due south then. Right there, where that buried thing was, there is an ice-drowned mountain ridge, a granite wall of unshakable strength that has dammed back the ice creeping from the south. And 400 miles due south is the South Polar Plateau. You have asked me at various times why it gets warmer here when the wind rises, and most of you know. As a meteorologist, I'd have staked my word that no wind could blow at 70 degrees, that no more than a 5-mile wind could blow at 50 degrees, without causing warming due to friction with ground, snow, and ice in the air itself. I will pause and note that these M dashes, these are all the M dashes are original, so I don't know what exactly is the importance of having them around the degrees. That might just be this particular author thing, or maybe a 1938 thing in particular. I've never seen it before or since. that no more than a 5-mile wind could blow at 50 without causing warming due to friction with ground, snow and ice, and the air itself. We camped there on the line of that ice-drowned mountain range for 12 days. We dug our camp into the blue ice that formed the surface and escaped most of it. But for 12 consecutive days the wind blew at 45 miles an hour. It went as high as 48 and fell to 41 at times. The temperature was 60 degrees. It rose to 60 and fell to 68. I really don't understand that. It was meteorologically impossible, and it went on uninterruptedly for 12 days and 12 nights. Somewhere to the south, the frozen air of the South Polar Plateau slides down from that 18,000-foot bowl, down a mountain pass, over a glacier, and starts north. There must be a funneling mountain chain that directs it and sweeps it away 400 miles to hit that bald plateau where we found the secondary pole, and 350 miles farther north reaches the Antarctic Ocean. It's been frozen there since Antarctica froze 20 million years ago. There has never been a thaw there. 20 million years ago, Antarctica was beginning to freeze. We've investigated, though, and built speculations. What we believe happened was about like this. Something came down out of space, a ship. We saw it there in the blue ice, a thing like a submarine without a conning tower or directive vanes, 280 feet long and 45 in diameter at its thickest. Eh? Van Wall? Space? Yes, but I'll explain that later. Macready's steady voice went on. It came down from space, driven and lifted by forces men haven't discovered yet, and somehow, perhaps something went wrong then, it tangled with Earth's magnetic field. It came south. I think that's my typo. It came south here, out of control probably, circling the magnetic pole. That's a savage country there, but when Antarctica was still freezing it must have been 1,000 times more savage. There must have been blizzard snow as well as drift, new snow falling as the continent glaciated. The swirl there must have been particularly bad, the wind hurling a solid blanket of white over the lip of that now buried mountain. The ship struck solid granite head-on and cracked up. Not every one of the passengers in it was killed, but the ship must have been ruined, her driving mechanism locked. It tangled with Earth's field, Norris believes. No thing made by intelligent beings can tangle with the dead immensity of the planet's natural forces and survive. Illustration here. Image description start. A black and white illustration of a tube-shaped black spaceship crashing through the air and striking the ground in a mountainous area. Image description end. One of its passengers stepped out. The wind we saw there never fell below 41 and the temperature never rose about 60. Then, the wind must have been stronger, and there was drift falling in a solid sheet. The thing was lost completely in 10 paces. He paused for a moment, the deep, steady voice giving way to the drone of wind overhead and the uneasy, malicious gurgling in the pipes of the galley stove. Drift. A drift wind was sweeping by overhead. Right now the snow picked up by the mumbling wind fled in level, blinding lines across the surface of the buried camp. If a man stepped out of the tunnels that connected each of the camp buildings beneath the surface, he'd be lost in 10 paces. Out there, the slim black figure of the radio mast lifted 300 feet into the air, and at its peak was the clear night sky. A sky of thin, I think that's another of my typos. There's some typos. Weird grammatical stuff is all him. A sky of thin, whining wind rushing steadily from beyond to another beyond under the licking, curling mantle of the aurora, and off north the horizon flamed with queer, angry colors of the midnight twilight. That was spring, 300 feet above Antarctica. At the surface, it was white death. Death of a needle-fingered cold driven before the wind, sucking heat. Sucking heat from any warm thing, cold and white mist of endless, everlasting drift, the fine, fine particles of licking snow that obscured all things. Kinner, the little scar-faced cook, winced. 5 days ago, he had stepped out to the surface to reach a cache of frozen beef. He had reached it, started back, and the driftwind had leapt out of the south. Cold, white death that streamed across the ground blinded him in 20 seconds. He stumbled on wildly in circles. It was half an hour before rope-guided men from below found him in the impenetrable murk. It was easy for man, or thing, to get lost in 10 paces. Hold on, there's a bug on me. Go away, fly. And the drift wind then was probably more impenetrable than we know. Macready's voice snapped Kinner's mind back to welcome dank warmth of the ad building. The passenger of the ship wasn't prepared either, it appears. It froze within 10 feet of the ship. We dug down to find the ship, and our tunnel happened to find the frozen animal. All the weird grammatical stuff, that's all him. Barclay's ice axe struck its skull. When we saw what it was, Barclay went back to the tractor, started the fire up, and when the steam pressure belt sent a call for Blair and Dr. Copper. Barclay himself was sick then. Stayed sick for 3 days, as a matter of fact. When Blair and Copper came, we cut out the animal in a block of ice, as you see, wrapped it and loaded it on the tractor for return here. We wanted to get into that ship. We reached the side and found the metal was something we didn't know. Our beryllium bronze, non-magnetic tools wouldn't touch it. Barclay had some tool steel of the tractor, and that wouldn't scratch it either. We made reasonable tests, even tried some acid from the batteries with no results. They must have had a passivating process to make magnesium metal resist acid that way, and the alloy must have been at least 95% magnesium. But we had no way of guessing that, so when we spotted the barely opened lock door, we cut around it. There was clear, hard ice inside the lock where we couldn't reach it. Through the little crack we could look in and see that only metal and tools were in there, so we decided to loosen the ice with a bomb. We had deconite bombs and thermite. Thermite is the ice softener. Deconite might have shattered the valuable things, where the thermite's heat would just loosen the ice. Dr. Copper, Norris, and I placed at 20. That's another typo. Placed a 25-pound thermite bomb, wired it, and took the connector up the tunnel to the surface, where Blair had the steam tractor waiting. 100 yards the other side of that granite wall, we set off the thermite bomb. The magnesium metal of the ship caught, of course. The glow of the bomb flared and died, then it began to flare again. We ran back to the tractor, and gradually the glare built up. From where we were, we could see the whole ice field illuminated from beneath with an unbearable light. The ship's shadow was a great dark cone reaching off towards the north, where the twilight was just about gone. For a moment it lasted, and we counted 3 other shadow things that might have been other passengers, frozen there. Then the ice was crashing down against the ship. That's why I told you about that place. The wind sweeping down from the pole was at our backs. Steam and hydrogen flame were torn away in white ice fog, the flaming heat under the Antarctic Ocean before it touched us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come back, even with the shelter of that granite ridge that stopped the light. Somehow, in the blinding inferno, we could see great hunched things, black bulks lowing even so. They shed even the furious incandescence of the magnesium for a time. Those must have been the engines, we knew. Secrets going in blazing glory. Secrets that might have given man the planets. Mysterious things that could lift and hurl that ship, and had soaked in the force of the Earth's magnetic field. I saw Norris's mouth moved and ducked. I couldn't hear him. Insulation something gave way. All Earth's field they'd soaked up 20 million years before it broke loose. The aurora in the sky above licked down, and the whole plateau there was bathed in cold fire that blanketed vision. The ice axe... It definitely is... Oh, don't... I'll have to fix that later. My keyboard's broken. The ice axe in my hand got red hot and hissed on the ice. Metal buttons on my clothes burned into me, and a flash of electric blue seared upward from beyond the granite wall. The walls of ice crashed down on it. For an instant it squealed the way dry ice does when it's pressed between metal. We were blind and groping in the dark for hours while our eyes have recovered. We found every coil within a mile was fused rubbish, the dynamo and every radio set, the earphones and speakers. If we hadn't had the steam tractor, we wouldn't have gotten over to the secondary camp. Van Wall flew in from the big magnet at sunup, as you know. We came home as soon as possible. That is the history of that. MacReady's great bronze beard gestured towards the thing on the table. Part 2. Blair stirred uneasily, his little bony fingers wriggling under the harsh light. Little brown flecks on his knuckles slid back and forth as the tendons under the skin twitched. He pulled aside a bit of the tarpaulin and looked impatiently at the dark, ice-bound thing inside. MacReady's big body straightened somewhat. He'd ridden the rocking, jarring steam tractor 40 miles that day, pushing onto Big Magnet here. Even his calm will had been pressed by the anxiety to mix again with humans. It was lone and quiet out there in secondary camp, where a wolf wind howled down from the North Pole. Wolf wind howling in his sleep. Winds droning and the evil, unspeakable face of that monster leering up as he'd first seen it through the clear blue ice, with a bronze ice axe buried in its skull. The giant meteorologist spoke again. The problem is this. Blair wants to examine the thing, thaw it out and make microslides of its tissues and so forth. Norris doesn't believe that is safe, and Blair does. Dr. Copper agrees pretty much with Blair. Norris is a physicist, of course, not a biologist, but he makes a point I think we should all hear. Blair has described the microscopic life forms biologists find living even in this cold and inhospitable place. They freeze every winter and thaw every summer. 3 months, and live. The point Norris makes is, they thaw and live again. There must have been microscopic life associated with this creature. There is with every living thing we know. And Norris is afraid that we may release a plague, some germ disease unknown to Earth, if we thaw those microscopic things that have been frozen there for 20 million years. Blair admits that such micro-life might retain the power of living. Such unorganized cells can retain life for unknown periods when solidly frozen. The beast itself is as dead as those frozen mammoths they find in Siberia. Organized, highly developed life forms can't stand that treatment, but micro-life could. Norris suggests that we may release some disease form that man, never having met it before, will be utterly defenseless against. Blair's answer is that there may be such still living germs, but that Norris has the case reversed. They are utterly non-immune to man. Our life chemistry probably, the little biologist's head lifted in a quick, bird-like motion, the halo of gray hair about his bald head ruffled as though angry. Onlook. I know, MacReady acknowledged. The thing is not earthly. Okay, that's supposed to be one look. My twin didn't feel like proofreading this for me. I know, MacReady acknowledged. The thing is not earthly. It does not seem likely that it can have a life chemistry sufficiently like ours to make cross-infection remotely possible. It would say there is no danger. MacReady looked towards Dr. Copper. The physician shook his head slowly. None whatever, he asserted confidently. Man cannot infect or be infected by germs that live in such comparatively close relatives as the snakes. And they are, I assure you. It's supposed to be assure, not assume. His clean, shaven face grimaced uneasily. Much closer to us than that. Vance Norris moved angrily. He was comparatively short in this gathering of big men, some 5'8", and his stocky, powerful build tended to make him seem shorter. His black hair was crisp and hard, like short steel wires, and his eyes were the gray of fractured steel. If Macready was a man of bronze, Norris was all steel. His movements, his thoughts, his whole bearing had the quick, hard impulse of a steel spring. His nerves were steel, hard, quick-acting, swift-corroding. He was decided on his point now, and he lashed out in its defense with a characteristic, quick, clipped flow of words. Different chemistry be damned. That thing may be dead. Or by God, it may be not. I'm not sure how loud the birds are going to show up on here. But I don't like it. Damn it, Blair, let them see the monstrosity you are petting over there. Let them see the foul thing and decide for themselves whether they want that thing thawed out in this camp. Thawed out, by the way. That's got to be thawed out in one of the shacks tonight, if it's thawed out. Somebody, who's watchman tonight? Conant. Cosmic rays tonight. Well, you get to set up with that 20-million-year-old mummy of his. Unwrap it, Blair. How the hell can they tell what they are buying if they can't see it? It may have a different chemistry. I don't care what else it has, but I know it has something I don't want. If you can judge by the look on its face, it isn't human, so maybe you can't. It was annoyed when it was frozen. Annoyed, in fact, is just about as close an approximation as the way it felt as crazy, mad, insane, hatred. Neither one touches the subject. How the hell can these birds tell what they are voting on? They haven't seen those 3 red eyes and that blue hair like crawling worms. Crawling. Damn, it's crawling there in the ice right now. Nothing Earth ever spawned had the unutterable sublimation of devastating wrath that thing let loose in its face when it looked around his frozen desolation millions of years ago. Mad? It was mad clear through. Searing, blistering mad. Hell, I've had bad dreams ever since I looked at those 3 red eyes. Nightmares. Dreaming the thing crawled out and came to life. That it wasn't dead, or even wholly unconscious all those 20 million years, but just slowed, waiting. You'll dream too, when that damned thing the Earth wouldn't own is dripping in the Cosmos house tonight. And, Conant, Norris whipped toward the cosmic ray specialist, won't you have fun sitting up all night in the quiet, wind whining above, and that thing dripping? He stopped for a moment and looked around. I know, that's not science, but this is. It's psychology. You'll have nightmares for a year to come. Every night since I looked at that thing, I've had 'em. That's why I hate it. Sure I do. And don't want it around. Put it back where it came from and let it freeze for another 20 million years. I've had some swell nightmares that it wasn't made like we are, which is obvious, but of a different kind of flesh that it can really control, that it can change its shape and look like a man and wait to kill and eat. That's not a logical argument. I know it isn't. The thing isn't Earth logic anyway. Maybe it has an alien body chemistry, and maybe its bugs do have a different body chemistry. A germ might not stand that, but Blair and Copper, how about a virus? That's just an enzyme molecule, you've said, that wouldn't need anything but a protein molecule of any body to work on. And how are you so sure that, of the million varieties of microscopic life it may have, none of them are dangerous? How about diseases like hydrophobia, rabies, that attacks any warm-blooded creature, whatever its body chemistry may be, and parrot fever? Have you a body like a parrot, Blair? And plain rot, gangrene, necrosis if you want. That isn't choose about body chemistry. I presume that's choosy. Blair looked up from his puttering long enough to meet Norris's angry gray eyes for an instant. So far, the only thing you have said this thing gave off that was catching was dreams. I'll go so far as to admit that. An impish, slightly malignant grin crossed the little man's seamed face. I had some too. So it's dream infectious. No doubt an exceedingly dangerous malady. So far as your other things go, you have a badly mistaken idea about viruses. In the first place, nobody has shown that the enzyme molecule theory and that alone explains them. And in the second place, when you catch tobacco mosaic or wheat rust, let me know. A wheat plant is a lot nearer your body chemistry than this otherworld creature is. And your rabies is limited, strictly limited. You can't get it from, you can't give it from, nor give it to, a wheat plant or a fish, which is a collateral descendant of a common ancestor of yours. Which this, Norris, is not. Blair nodded pleasantly toward the tarpaulined bulk on the table. Well, thaw the damned thing in a tub of formalin if you must thaw it. I've suggested that. And I've said that there would be no sense in it. You can't compromise. Why did you and Commander Gary come down here to study magnetism? Why aren't you content to stay at home? There's magnetic force enough in New York. I could no more study the life this thing once had from a formalin-pickled sample than you could get the information you wanted back in New York. And if this one is so treated, never in all time to come can there be a duplicate. The race it came from must have passed away in the 20 million years it lay frozen, so that even if it came from Mars then, we'd never find its like, and the ship is gone. Let me pause while I get a drink. I have no idea if they have tea. I would make tea. It'd be so nice if I had a mouse with a scrolly wheel. There's only one way to do this, and it is the best possible way. It must be thawed slowly, carefully, and not in formalin. Commander Gary stood forward again, and Norris stepped back, muttering angrily. I think Blair is right, gentlemen. What do you say? Conant grunted. It sounds right to us, I think. Only perhaps you ought to stand watch over it while it's thawing. He grinned ruefully, brushing a stray lock of ripe cherry hair back from his forehead. Swell idea, in fact, if he sits up with his jolly little corpse. Gary smiled slightly. A general chuckle of agreement rippled over the group. I should think any ghost it may have had would have starved to death if it hung around here that long, Conant, Gary suggested. And you look capable of taking care of it. Iron Man, Conant ought to be able to take out any opposing players still. Conant shook himself uneasily. I'm not worrying about ghosts. Let's see that thing. I eagerly I don't know if you can hear them. Eagerly, Blair was stripping back the ropes. A single throw of the tarpaulin revealed the thing. The ice had melted somewhat in the heat of the room, and it was clear and blue as thick, good glass. It shone wet and sleek under the harsh light of the unshielded globe above. The room stiffened abruptly. It was face up there on the plain, greasy planks of the table. The broken haft of the bronze ice-axe was still buried in the queer skull. 3 mad, hate-filled eyes blazed up with a living fire, bright as fresh-spilled blood from a face ringed with a writhing, loathsome nest of worms, blue, mobile worms that crawled where hair would grow. Image description start. Half a dozen men crowded around a block of ice on a table with streams of meltwater running away. Inside the block of ice, just visible, is the body of an alien. It has 3 eyes, visible on a small, oval-shaped face with a squat body and 4 tentacle-like limbs in place of arms or legs. A bright light bulb burns on a ceiling above. Image description end. Van Wall, 6 feet and 200 pounds of ice-nerved pilot, gave a queer, strangled gasp and butted, stumbling his way out to the corridor. Half the company broke for the doors. The others stumbled away from the table. Macready stood at one end of the table watching them, his great body planted solid on his powerful legs. Norris from the opposite end glowered at the thing with smoldering hate. Outside the door, Gary was talking with a half-dozen men at once. Blair had a tack hammer. The ice that cased the thing sloughed crisply under its steel claw. That's not really the noise I would onomatopoeia, I would say, for a nice, clear, crisp noise, but crisply under its steel claw as it peeled away from the thing it had cased for 20,000 years. Part 3. I know you don't like that thing, Conan, but it just has to be thought out right. You say leave it as it is till we get back to civilization. All right, I'll admit your argument that we could do better and more complete job there is sound, but how are we going to get this across the line? We have to take this through one temperate zone, the equatorial zone, and halfway through the other temperate zone before we get it to New York. You don't want to sit with it one night, but you suggest then that I hang its corpse in the freezer with the beef? Blair looked up from his cautious chipping, his bald, freckled skull nodding triumphantly. Kinner, the stocky, scar-faced cook, saved Conant the trouble of answering. Hey, you listen, mister, you put that thing in the box with the meat, and by all the gods there ever were, I'll put you in to keep it company. You birds have brought everything movable in this camp onto my mess tables here already, and I plan to stand for that, and I had to stand for that. But you go putting things like that in my meat box, or even my meat cage here, and you cook your own damn grub. But Kinner, this is the only table in Big Magnet that's big enough to work on, Blair objected. Everybody's explained that. Yeah, and everybody's brought everything in here. Clark brings his dogs every time there's a fight and sews them up on that table. Ralston brings in his sledges. Hell, the only thing you haven't had on that table is the Boeing. And you had that time in you if you could have figured out a... And you had had? I don't know what this sentence means. And you had a time... Let me zoom in. And you had that in you if you could have figured out a way to get it through the tunnels. I don't know why he put two different apostrophes there. You just needed one. Commander Gary chuckled and grinned at Van Wall, the huge chief pilot. Van Wall's great blond beard twitched suspiciously as he nodded gravely to Kinner. You're right, Kinner. The aviation department is the only one that treats you right. It does get crowded, Kinner, Gary acknowledged, but I'm afraid we all have to find it that way at times. Not much privacy in an Antarctic camp. Privacy? What the hell's that? You know, the thing that really made me weep was when I saw Barclay marching through here chanting, "The last lumber in the camp, the last lumber in the camp," and carrying it out to build that house on his tractor. Damn it, I missed that moon cut in the door he'd carried out more'n I missed the sun when it set. That wasn't the last lumber Barclay was walking off with. He was carrying off the last bit of privacy in this blasted place. A grin rode on Conant's heavy face as Kinner's perennial good-natured grouch came up again, but it died away quickly as his dark, deep-set eyes turned again to the red-eyed thing Blair was chipping from its cocoon of ice. A big hand ruffled his shoulder-length hair and tugged it at a twisted lock that fell behind his ear in a familiar gesture. I know that cosmic ray shack's going to be too crowded if I have to sit up with that thing, he growled. Why can't you go on chipping the ice away from around it? You can do that without anybody butting in, I assure you, and then hang the thing up over the power plant boiler. That's warm enough. It'll thaw out a chicken, even a whole side of beef, in a few hours. I know, Blair protested, dropping the tack hammer to gesture more effectively with his bony, freckled fingers, his small body tense with eagerness, but this is too important to take any chances. There never was a find like this, there never can be again. It's the only chance man will ever have, and it has to be done exactly right. Look, you know how the fish we caught down near the Ross Sea would freeze almost as soon as we got them on deck and come to life again if we thawed them gently? Low forms of life aren't killed by quick freezing and slow thawing. We have... Hey, for the love of heaven, you mean that damn thing will come to life? Conant yelled. You get the damn thing? Let me at it. That's going to be in so many pieces. No, you fool! Blair jumped in front of Conant to protect his precious find. No! Just low forms of life. For Pete's sake, let me finish. You can't thaw higher forms of life and have them come too. Wait a minute now. Hold it. A fish can come to after freezing because it's so low a form of life that the individual cells of its body can revive, and that alone is enough to re-establish life. Any higher forms thawed out that way are dead. Though the individual cells revive, they die because there must be organization and cooperative effort to live. That cooperative cannot be re-established. There is a sort of potential life in any uninjured, quick-frozen animal, but it can't, under any circumstances, become active life in higher animals. The higher animals are too complex, too delicate. This is an intelligent creature as high in its evolution as we are in ours. Perhaps higher. It is as dead as a frozen man would be. How do you know? Demanded Conant, hefting the ice axe he had seized a moment before. Commander Gary laid a restraining hand on his heavy shoulder. Wait a minute, Conant. I want to get this straight. I agree that there is going to be thawing of this thing. It's supposed to be isn't, probably. I agree that there isn't going to be thawing of this thing if there is the remotest chance of its revival. I quite agree it is much too unpleasant to have alive, but I had no idea there was the remotest possibility. Dr. Copper pulled his pipe from between his teeth and heaved his stocky dark body from the bunk he had been sitting in. Blair's being technical. That's dead. As dead as the mammoths they find frozen in Siberia. Potential life is like atomic energy. There, but nobody can get it out, and it certainly won't release itself except in rare cases, as rare as radium in the chemical analogy. We have all sorts of proof that things don't live after being frozen, not even fish, generally speaking, and no proof that higher animal life can under any circumstances. What's the point, Blair? The little biologist shook himself. The little ruff of hair standing out around his bald pate waved in righteous anger. The point is, he said in an injured tone, that the individual cells might show the characteristics they had in life if it is properly thawed. A man's muscle cells live many hours after he has died. Just because they live, and a few things like hair and fingernail cells still live, you wouldn't accuse a corpse of being a zombie or something. We gotta have some quotation marks there. Now, if I thaw this right, I may have a chance to determine what sort of world it's native to. We don't and can't know by any other means whether it came from Earth or Mars or Venus or from beyond the stars. And just because it looks unlike men, you don't have to accuse it of being evil or vicious or something. Maybe that expression on its face is its equivalent of a resignation to fate. White is the color of mourning to the Chinese. If men can have different customs, why can't a so different race have different understandings of facial expressions? Conant laughed softly, mirthlessly. Peaceful resignation! If that is the best it can do in the way of resignation, I should exceedingly dislike seeing it when it was looking mad. That face was never designed to express peace. It just didn't have any philosophical thoughts like peace in its makeup. I know it's your pet, but be sane about it. That thing grew up on evil, adolesced, slowly roasting alive the local equivalent of kittens, and amused itself through maturity on new and ingenious torture. You haven't the slightest right to say that, snapped Blair. How do you know the first thing about the meaning of a facial expression inherently inhuman? It may well have no human equivalent whatever. That is just a different development of nature, another example of nature's wonderful adaptability. Growing on another, perhaps harsher world, it has different form and features, but it is just as much a legitimate child of nature as you are. You are displaying that childish human weakness of hating the different. On its own world it would probably class you as a fish-belly white monstrosity with an insufficient number of eyes and a fungoid body pale and bloated with gas. Just because its nature is different, you haven't any right to say that it's necessarily evil. Norris burst out a single explosive "Ha!" and looked down at the thing. Maybe that things from other worlds don't have to be evil just because they're different, but that thing was. Child of nature, eh? Well, it was a hell of an evil nature. "Aw, will you mugs cut crabbing at each other and get the thing off my table?" Kinner growled. and put a damn... Oh, hold on. "Aw, will you mugs cut the crabbing at each other and get the damned thing off my table," Kinner growled, "and put a canvas over it. It looks indecent." "Kinner's gone modest," jeered Conant. Kinner slanted his eyes up to the big physicist. The scarred cheek twisted to join the line of his tight lips in a twisted grin. "All right, big boy, and what were you grousing about a minute ago? We can set the thing in a chair next to you tonight, if you want." "I'm not afraid of its face," Conant snapped. "I don't like keeping awake over its corpse particularly, but I'm going to do it." Kinner's grin spread. "Uh-huh." He went off to the galley stove and shook down ashes, vigorously, drowning the brittle chipping of the ice as Blair fell to work again. Can you hear the little birdie chirping over there? "Cluck," reported the cosmic ray counter. "Cluck, burp, cluck." Conan started and dropped his pencil. "Damnation!" The physicist looked toward the far corner, back at the Geiger counter on the table near that corner, and crawled under the desk at which he had been working to retrieve the pencil. He sat down at his work again, trying to make his writing more even. It tended to have jerks and quavers in it, in time with the abrupt, proud hen noises of the Geiger counter. The muted whoosh of the pressure lamp he was using for illumination, the mingled gargles and bugle calls of a dozen men sleeping down the corridor in Paradise House, formed the background noises for the irregular clucking noises of the counter, the occasional rustle of falling coal in the copper-bellied stove, and a soft, steady drip, drip, drip from the thing in the corner. Conant jerked a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, snapped it so that a cigarette protruded, and jabbed the cylinder into his mouth. The lighter failed to function, and he pawed angrily through the pile of papers in search of a match. He scratched the wheel of the lighter several times, dropped it with a curse, and got up to pluck a hot coal from the stove with the coal tongs. The lighter functioned instantly when he tried it on returning to the desk. The counter ripped out a series of chuckling guffaws as a burst of cosmic rays struck through to it. Conant turned to glower at it and tried to concentrate on the interpretation of data collected during the past week. The weekly summary he gave up and yielded to curiosity or nervousness. He lifted the pressure lamp from the desk and carried it over to the table in the corner. Then he returned to the stove and picked up the coal tongs. The beast had been thawing for nearly 18 hours now. He poked at it with an unconscious caution. The flesh was no longer hard as armor plate, but it had assumed a rubbery texture. It looked like wet, blue rubber glistening under droplets of water, like little round jewels in the glare of the gasoline pressure lantern. Conant felt an unreasoning desire to pour the contents of the lamp's reservoir over the thing in the box and drop the cigarette into it. The 3 red eyes glared up at him sightlessly, the ruby eyeballs reflecting murky, smoky rays of light. He realized vaguely that he had been looking at them for a very long time, even vaguely understood that they were no longer sightless. But it did not seem of no more importance than the labored, slow motion of the tentacular things that sprouted from the base of the scrawny, slowly pulsing neck. Conant picked up the pressure lamp and returned to his chair. He sat down, staring at the pages of mathematics before him. The clucking of the counter was strangely less disturbing, the rustle of the coals in the stove no longer distracting. The creak of the floorboards behind him didn't interrupt his thoughts as he went about his weekly report in an automatic manner, filling in columns of data and making brief, summarizing notes. The creak of the floorboards sounded nearer. Part 5. Blair came up from the nightmare-haunted depths of sleep abruptly. Conant's face floated vaguely above him. For a moment it seemed a continuance of the wild horror of the dream. But Conant's face was angry and a little frightened. Blair, you damned log, wake up!" Eh? The little biologist rubbed his eyes. His bony, freckled fingers crooked into a mutilated child fist. From surrounding bunks other faces lifted to stare down at them. Conan straightened up. Get up and get a lift on. Your damned animals escaped. Escaped? What? Chief Pilot Van Wall's bull voice roared out with a volume that shook the walls. Down the communication tunnels, other voices yelled suddenly. The dozen inhabitants of Paradise House tumbled in abruptly, Barclay, stocky and bulbous in long woolen underwear, carrying a fire extinguisher. Good job, Barclay. What the hell's the matter? Barclay demanded. Your damned beast got loose. I fell asleep about 20 minutes ago, and when I woke up, the thing was gone. Hey, Doc, the hell you say those things can't come to life? Blair's blasted potential life developed a hell lot of potential and walked out on us. Copper stared blankly. It wasn't earthly, he sighed suddenly. I guess earthly laws don't apply. Well, it applied for leave of absence and took it. We've got to find it and capture it somehow. Conan swore bitterly, his deep-set black eyes sullen and angry. It's a wonder the hellish creature didn't eat me in my sleep. Blair stared back, his pale eyes suddenly fear-struck. Maybe it did, we'll have to find it. You find it. It's your pet. I've had all I want to do with it, sitting there for 7 hours with the counter clucking every few seconds, and you birds in here singing night music. It's a wonder I got to sleep. I'm going through to the ad building. Commander Gary ducked through the doorway. Presumably. Pulling his belt tight. You won't have to. Van's roar sounded like the Boeing taking off downwind. So it wasn't dead? I didn't carry it off in my arms, I assure you, Conan snapped. The last I saw, that split skull was oozing green goo like a squashed caterpillar. Doc's just said our laws don't work. It's unearthly. Well, it's an unearthly monster with an unearthly disposition, judging by the face, wandering around with a split skull and brains oozing out. Norris and McCready appeared in the doorway. A doorway filling with other shivering men. Has anybody seen it coming over? Has anybody seen it? Are you trying to join in on the audiobook? That sounded like a yes. Has anybody seen it coming over here? Norris asked innocently. Has anybody seen it coming over here? Norris asked innocently. About 4 feet tall, 3 red eyes, brains oozing out. Hey, has anybody checked to make sure this isn't a correct idea of humor? If it is, I think we'll unite in tying Blair's pet around Conan's neck like the ancient mariner's albatross. It's no humor, Conan shivered. Lords, I wish it were. I'd rather wear... He stopped. A wild, weird howl shrieked through the corridors. The men stiffened abruptly and half turned. All right, Lightning, this is your cue to howl if you're gonna. He said no. I think it's been located, Conan finished. Just go back to the start of the video and play that howling noise here for background. I think it's been located, Conan finished. His dark eyes shifted with a queer unease. He darted back to his bunk in Paradise House and to return almost immediately with a .47 with a 47. I'm sorry, I don't know anything about guns. I don't know if you're supposed to say point or just 47. Almost immediately with a .47 revolver and an ice axe. He hefted both gently as he started for the corridor towards Dogtown. It blundered down the wrong corridor and landed among the huskies. Listen, the dogs had broken their chains. The half-terrorized howl of the dog pack had changed to a wild hunting melee. The voices of the dogs thundered in the narrow corridors, and through them came a low, rippling snarl of distilled hate, a shrill of pain, a dozen snarling yelps. Hey, Lightning! Ooh. You want to howl for YouTube? It'll be perfect timing. They do it earlier for literally no reason at all. Lightning! You want to howl? Are you coming over to say hi? Lucy! You want to howl? The birds want to join in. The birds are doing it for us. Sorry, guys. There's nobody at the door. Hold on. I wasn't trying to get your hopes up. There's nobody here. Sorry, puppies. Bedtime soon. What? How are you that smart? Okay. I was pulling down a curtain so people wouldn't be able to see inside, and the dogs just opened it again. Okay. Conant broke for the door. Close behind him, Macready, then Barclay, and Commander Gary came. Other men broke for the ad building and weapons, the sledge house. Pomeroy, in charge of Big Magnet's 5 cows, started down the corridor in the opposite direction. He had a 6-foot-handled, long-tined pitchfork in mind. Barclay slid to a... That's a halt, not a half. Barclay slid to a halt as Macready's giant bulk turned abruptly away from the tunnel leading to Dogtown and vanished off at an angle. Uncertainly, the mechanician, that's original, wavered a moment, the fire extinguisher in his hands, hesitating from one side to the other. Then he was racing after Conant's broad back. Whatever Macready had in mind, he could be trusted to make it work. Conant stopped at the bend in the corridor. His breath hissed suddenly through his throat. Great God! The revolver exploded thunderously, 3 numbing, palpable waves of sound crashing through the confined corridors. 2 more. The revolver dropped to the hard, packed snow of the trail, and Barclay saw the ice axe shift into a defensive position. Conant's powerful body blocked his vision, but beyond he heard something mewing and insanely chuckling. The dogs were quieter. There was a deadly seriousness in their low snarls. Taloned feet scraped at hard-packed snow. Broken chains were clinking and tangling. Conant shifted abruptly, and Barclay could see what lay beyond. For a second he stood frozen, then his breath went out in a gusty curse. The thing launched itself at Conant. The powerful arms of the man swung the ice axe flat side first at what might have been a head. It scrunched horribly, and the tattered flesh, ripped by a half-dozen savage huskies, leapt to its feet again. The red eyes blazed with an unearthly hatred, an unearthly, unkillable vitality. I feel like there's an extra space there. I was right. Barclay turned the fire extinguisher on it. The blinding, blistering stream of chemical spray confused it, baffled it, together with the savage attacks of the huskies, not for long afraid of anything that did or could live. Huh? Together with the savage attacks of the huskies, not for long afraid of anything that did or could live, held it at bay. I'm pretty sure that's an original sentence. I don't understand. Macready wedged men out of his way and drove down the narrow corridor packed with men unable to reach the scene. There was a sure-fore-planned drive to Macready's attack. One of the giant blowtorches used in warming the plane's engines was in his bronzed hands. It roared gustily as he turned the corner, and opened the valve. The mad mewling hissed louder. The dogs scrambled back from the 3-foot lance of blue-hot flame. Bar, get a power cable, run it in somehow. And a handle. We can electrocute this monster if I don't incinerate it. Macready spoke with an authority of planned action. Barclay turned down the long corridor to the power plant, but already before him Norris and Van Wall were racing down. Barclay found the cable in the electrical cache in the tunnel wall. In a half minute he was hacking at it, walking back. Van Wall's voice rang out in warning shout of power as the emergency gasoline-powered dynamo thudded into action. Half a dozen other men were down there now. The coal, kindling, were going into the firebox of the steam power plant. Norris, cursing in a low, deadly monotone, was working with quick, sure fingers on the other end of Barclay's cable, splicing in a contactor in one of the power leads. The dogs had fallen back when Barclay reached the corridor bend, falling back before a furious monstrosity that glared from baleful red eyes, mewing in trapped hatred. The dogs were a semicircle of red-dipped muzzles with a fringe of glistening white teeth, whining with a vicious eagerness that near matched the fury of the red eyes. Macready stood confidently alert at the corridor bend, the gustily muttering torch held loose and ready for action in his hands. He stepped aside without moving his eyes from the beast. As Barclay came up, there was a slight, tight smile on his lean, bronzed face. Oh, buttons, stop jumping. Norris's voice called down the corridor, and Barclay stepped forward. The cable was taped to the long handle of a snow shovel. The two conductors split and held 18 inches apart by a scrap of lumber lashed at right angles across the far end of the handle. Bare copper conductors charged with 230 volts glinted in the light of pressure lamps. The things mewed and hated and dodged. Macready advanced to Barclay's side. The dogs beyond sensed the plan with the almost telepathic intelligence of trained huskies. Their whining grew shriller, softer. Their mincing steps carried them nearer. Abruptly, a huge, night-black Alaskan leapt onto the trapped thing. It turned, squalling, saber-clawed feet lashing. Barclay leapt forward and jabbed. A weird, shrill scream rose and choked out. The smell of burnt flesh in the corridor intensified. Greasy smoke curled up. The echoing pound of the glass electric dynamo down the corridor became a slogging thud. The red eyes clouded over in a stiffening, jerking travesty of a face. Arm-like, leg-like members quivered and jerked. The dogs leapt forward, and Barclay yanked back his shovel-handled weapon. The thing on the snow did not move as gleaming teeth ripped it open. Okay, and I'm going to take a break, and we'll just have a multi-part video thing. So, see you later.